This has got to be one of the strangest looking tanks ever made, whereas this one is arguably the most famous tank ever made. So what's the difference? World War II saw the rise of some of the most iconic tanks ever built, but I think there are definitely two American tanks that stand out, the M4 Sherman and the M3 Lee. Now both played pivotal roles in the Allied victory, yet they were very different in design and performance, so I'm going to have a quick look at these differences between the two vehicles. The M4 Sherman is often called the workhorse of World War II. It was known for its versatility and its massive production numbers, but the M3 Lee, which was an earlier design, was crucial in the early stages of the war and helped shape tank warfare during its time. So what set these two tanks apart? How did the M4 Sherman evolve into arguably the main tank of the war, while the M3 Lee didn't see the same sort of successes? In this video we'll have a look at their design, the firepower mobility and the battlefield roles to help understand how each contributed to the war effort, and we'll even see some videos inside of the vehicle so you guys can actually see what they would have looked like inside. Now before I continue, remember you can actually come and see both of these vehicles here at the Armourgeddon Military Museum and Tank Driving Centre. We've got a load of vehicles here, so if you want to learn more, by all means click the link down in the description. Now before we go any further, what we're going to do, we're actually going to hop inside of the vehicles and have a good look around. Now Stuart's already inside the Lee, so I'll pass you on to him.
So this is where the rest of the crew in the Lee go. You have your driver, you've got another gunner and another loader back there. And then where the cameraman is, there where Alex is, that's where the radio operator would be. And you've got your poor old gunner here next to the 75mm gun. He has to do all the aiming, traversing, etc. Very limited traverse on here though. But again, the vision is just terrible. You've just got virtually nothing to see through. One gun sight and that's about it. The loader there behind me, he can get at all the ammunition. He's probably got the best spot of the whole crew because he can get out when it gets hit. So he's got an emergency escape hatch underneath the floor there where his feet are, but also he can get out through the top. Poor old driver, he's stuck here, and I think if you're thin enough you could probably get out the driver's hatch, but the gunner here has got to get himself untangled and get out, and the poor old radio operator there where Alex is with the camera, absolutely no chance of getting out of there in a hurry at all. And again, we'll show you when we get into the Sherman, sort of the differences. Driver's got a lot more room there and a hatch directly above him so he can get out. And he's got a machine gunner next to him, the bow gunner next to him, which has got roughly the same sort of area to get out of. But we'll show you in that in a second. A lot more room and only a 5-man crew in that one. So here we have Alex in the radio operator's position. And what do you think, Alex? Looks pretty horrendous.
It is, it's very tight, and I must say it wouldn't be a very good radio operator, mainly because he hasn't got a radio, so we haven't got one in this Lee, but usually there would be an old radio setup just here. You've also got your fresh water just here. Obviously being in the desert, you're going to need fresh water. It would be absolutely horrendous else. And down here to your left, we've also got the personal weapons. Obviously if you ever need to jump out and go running at the Germans, then you would need something to help fight with. But yeah, obviously you've got the turret behind me that would constantly be spinning around, and because they've been going quite fast at all times, you'd always want to be careful not to get yourself caught on there. But yeah, it's definitely very crowded in here, but he's probably got arguably one of the better jobs because he's not got to be rushing around as much as the drivers, worrying about getting us killed or anything like that. However, if there was an emergency, this guy here would be one of the last people to get out. As you can imagine, through the escape hatch up top there, you've got everyone else who's got to get out, and then obviously the 3 guys in the turret. If you want to exit out that way, you've got to wait until they get out that way as well. So yeah, out of the 7 people, this guy here would very likely be the last one out. Now obviously in the Lee you would have 7 people, mainly because you had, like I say, the extra guy for the radio operator. However, when we go over into the Sherman, you'll notice they took the radio out of the sort of driver's area and they actually chucked it back into the turret, so the gunner and, for example, the commander, they'd be able to use it.
Right, so this is where your gunner for the 75mm sits. This is your elevation. Everything's a bit stiff in here because it's not been used, but this would normally spin very, very easily. And then you've got your traverse here. And again, a bit stiff, but it would traverse normally very, very easily. Gunner's sight here, you've got a clear periscope, and then there's a tube that's got the actual gun sight on it. You can't see very well, but that's all in that little vision there. And that is all the gunner's got to see through, really. And his job is to just sit here, put his head up against there, shoulders right against the gun there, as you can see, and he's got to control the gun and find the targets. Then you move back to the poor old loader again at the back. Again, he is in a better position, but I'm going to move around a little bit and give a bit of space so the cameraman can see. So you've got your loader back here. His job is to get the ammunition out of there, And how many's in there? 12, did you say?
There's 12 in this rack, and there's probably about, what?
Probably about 20
underneath there as well.
And his job is to get the ammunition out of there. He's got to load it into this gun back here, slam it in, close it all up, and normally he would give the gunner a tap on the shoulder to say he was ready to fire. Because you have to remember that gun recoils as well, so the loader can't be anywhere near that when it comes back. So not a great place to fight, but out of all the places in here so far, that is probably the best one. So now over to the driver. Elliot here is probably a little bit tall for this job, because actually with him sitting upright he can't actually see out the hatch at all. And remember, this hatch would be closed up and there's just a small vision slit in the middle of it. And there's also a side here, so a periscope here, so you can turn that and see sideways. But again, visibility is pretty crap there. What do you think, Elliot?
I think for a smaller chap it'd be a lot better. You got your gearbox that sits right between your legs, so obviously over time this is going to get piping hot and it's not going to make working in the desert any better. And it feels a bit weird being dead centre. You've got nice vision, but if you did see an enemy tank facing you, you'd be a bit scared, because this is probably the most likely spot they're going to hit, dead centre of the vehicle. So the driver's had it from a Panzer or anything like that, so it's not the best position to be in.
As you can see here in front of the driver, there's rivets. These are actually rivets, and what they've done is they've actually welded the rivets in. The reason for that is because if it takes a hit on the outside, the rivet will snap off, and even if the round itself didn't come in, that rivet head would then rattle around in here and cause horrendous injuries or death. So the idea was they eventually welded them all in, and that was designed to stop that happening. But later on in the war, when you see the Sherman in a second, you'll see that's completely welded hull. There's no rivets, so it's a much better design and a lot safer for the crews. Now the driver's position had clutch and accelerator, the steering tillers were your brakes, and then you had a transmission brake down here, right down the bottom there. They got rid of it in the Sherman, wasn't needed, but in the Sexton we've got one of those in that, and it was basically to lock the transmission. It was basically putting the handbrake on. What you did have to remember though was to take it off before you try and moved. Not sure if it'd do any damage because we've never tried it, but I'm guessing it probably would have done. But yeah, the Sherman, they got rid of that, didn't need it. So here we have us, all three of us in the turret. This is the turret of the Lee, and as you can see, this is horrendously tight. This is obviously our gunner's position here, and then we have our loader over here, and then the commander would be just where I am back here. There is absolutely no room. I think the lads will vouch for that.
Nothing.
And if our gunner here can just demonstrate how the gun would work, traversing, etc. Oh, it's a little bit.
It's a bit stiff. You got elevation.
And as it comes down, it goes on
whack
his
my head. And then press going the other way.
And then you traverse. And back again. So as you can see, just for the poor old gunner, there's not a lot of room. His gun sight's there, and all his working bits are there in front of him. And then you've got your poor old loader over here. He's got all his ready racks here. Ready racks are where the ammunition would be, so all you have to do is grab it and load it. But Luke's only quite small, and even for Luke, he's got to be able to get the rounds and get them up here into the gun, and then slam the gun shut. He's also in charge of the 30 cal machine gun, which we've got the mount here. There's no gun in there, but the mount's there. And then the ammunition for the 30 cal is on this side over here. So we have to get it off the floor, up in here, change the box. All of that has to be done with the gun up in the air as well, so the gun elevated, as you can't get the ammunition in there. So it just gives you an idea of how tight this was for three men. Imagine being in the desert, locked down in horrendous heat, gun going off, fumes in here, obviously everybody scared to death. It must have been a horrendous place to actually have to work and fight. But this is an idea of what this one's like. Then we'll show you the Sherman in a second, and there's a little bit more room in that. So Luke, you are in our loader's position next to the 37mm gun here. Can you imagine being in battle in that position?
Absolutely not. I mean, imagining it with all of the ammo and the ready racks all around here, it'd feel very, very claustrophobic. Directly behind me, I've got the pistol port and I've got the handle just to my side there. I'd be constantly hitting my head on that. You've got your machine gun mount here as well, so imagine with a machine gun, all of the rounds would be flinging back at me, and trying to sort of load the U37mm here. I can't actually visually see what I'm doing, so you'll have to do it all by sort of like feel and hand. I mean, in the dark here, we've only got the one tiny little light. It'd be absolutely horrendous, and with the heat of the desert during the day, it'd be horrible, absolutely horrible.
So there you go. You can just imagine being in there with a gun firing as well, and the ammunition on the floor that he has to pick up and load. It's a horrendous position. Fortunately, that was always saved for the smallest bloke, which in this occasion is Luke. And then we move down to the gunner down here. I'll try and get the camera around without wrecking it. So we've got Elliot in here, and poor old Elliot's got the
Worst job.
probably even
Worst job.
he's got more work to do down there.
A lot
probably.
more work. It's horrible in this position. I'm hunkered down, so I've been sat in here for 5 minutes, and my back is already killing. With, like Stu said, with the machine gun box next to me, it would be constantly hitting my head if I've got to elevate the gun. The handle's in a really odd position as well. It's not the most comfortable turret to elevate and turn, and your vision port, I can't see anything out of it. The gunner's sight is quite clear and it's all right, but the vision port itself, I've got no idea what's around me. And like the lads have already said, with everything going on, it would be a sweatbox, and it would be so chaotic with everything going on around you.
And you have to remember, with all this going on in here, the commander is trying to control the battle from up here, and he just has one small periscope as well, so it just gives you an idea in here. But we'll show you in the Sherman in a little while, and that gives you a better idea of how things progressed. So this gives you an idea of how tight it is inside the Lee. We're going to compare it to the Sherman, so we'll show you in there in a second. And you have to remember, you had a bigger gun in the Sherman, but the same number of crew in the turret. So you still had your gunner, you still had your loader, and you still had your commander. But they had a lot more room to work and control the battle in there. So we'll get you in there in a second and show you a little bit more. Right, so here we are in the M4 Sherman. This is the 105 version. This is the 105 gun here. Here's one of the shells it would have fired. As you can see straight away, compared to the Lee, there's a lot more room for the loader. So this is the loader's position. Ammunition would have been all under the floor here, and as you can see, Luke would pick the ammo up. His job would have been to slam it in there, close the gun up, and then we'll be ready to fire. Gunner's job then would be to find the target and fire the actual gun. The other job for the loader in here as well, though, was for the 30 cal machine gun there. He had to keep that fed, keep that working, and every so often his job as well would be to work the radios in the back here. So although he's got plenty of room, he has got quite a job on his hands, because once the gun's fired, the shell gets ejected and he has to dispose of that, as we'll show you. So the gun will be fired, and then the shell would eject. Your loader there would have grabbed it, thrown it out through the hole there, or out through the top hatch, and get the next round. Right, as you can see, this is the radio. Remember in the Lee, it was down in the hull. Up here, it's in the turret. And that's why the turrets were this shape. They had that great big bustle at the back there. And that was basically so you could fit the radio in it. Job of the radio operator, was either the loader or the commander if necessary. But a lot easier to get at. And it meant you had one less member of crew needed, which was obviously going to be a good thing. In the commander's position, again, a lot better vision straight away. You can notice you've got these vision ports all the way around the side here, so the commander can see all the way around. If I close the commander's hatch here, again he has another periscope that swings all the way around. A lot more room straight away, and when he's not down here, he can raise his seat up, sit up there with his head out. And if you've seen the movie Fury, you'll see old Brad Pitt there with his helmet on, one of these one of these types of helmets. And then while he's got his head out the top, he actually puts the tin helmet on the top. The idea being that it gave him a little bit more protection than just this leather. These were basically just to stop you bashing your head inside here. So Commander's got a nice position, as good as anything. At least he can get out if there's a problem. But again, apparently when they were actually in battle, and they usually had their heads out the top just a little bit so they could see what was going on a little bit easier. And obviously that was quite a dangerous place to be, so quite often the snipers would be taking out your commanders. So although it's got a bit more room in here, still not a nice place to be. So here we have the gunner, and the commander's obviously just behind here. The reason he's here is so he can tap him on the shoulder and give him direction as necessary. These two have to work very closely together. You've got the traverse and your elevation, I don't know if you can see that. And then you've got your gun sights up here and your periscopes. And as you move the gun up and down, if you just watch this periscope, you see how it all moves with it. So it always stays lined up at all times. Now in the 75mm gun and the 76, this would have been hydraulic. Because this is the 105, it's all manual, which is mainly because it wasn't designed really to do tank-on-tank warfare. It didn't need to be as quick. This would be in a probably a more fixed position, and they had more time to actually aim it. But again, still pretty crowded, but still more room than in the Lee. How do you think?
It's a lot better than the Lee. The handles are in a bit of a weird position, but that might just be me because of the size that I am. But it's not as claustrophobic. It's a lot better, and I feel like you'd be a lot more aware and a lot more on guard than the Lee. The Lee's so cramped, I think you'd be stressed about everything else that's going on around you. So at least with this, you're a little bit more relaxed. It's not a nice place to be, but it's not terrible.
So that's the three positions in the turret. As you can see, a lot better than the Lee, but still pretty horrendous. So now we'll move down into the driver's area and give you an idea of what it's like down there.
Right, so this is your driver's position. And getting out of the Lee and getting in the Sherman is actually very similar. Big difference is your gearbox that's now between myself, the driver, and your bow gunner on my right. It's still going to get warm and it's still going to be bloody noisy, so there's not much difference, but in a weird way it's probably a little bit safer not having it between your legs. But driving style, it's pretty much the same. Your gear stick is still on your right hand side, you've got your clutch on the left, accelerator on the right, and your two sticks in the middle. So the driving arrangement is very similar. You could get out the Lee, jump in a Sherman, and you'd be pretty confident with how to drive it. And to be honest, in general, I feel a lot safer. Not only does the Sherman have more armour with a slanted front to give you that little bit more protection, with the amount of space you've got and the hatch above you, it just feels so much better. Rather than the Lee trying to clamber out that front hatch if I was thin enough, having the hatch to open that will fly open and lock back, I can quickly jump out and I'm away from the vehicle. So here's the engine panel on my left. In the Lee, it's literally a bar that just goes across the front of you. That's very close up as well. Whereas with having this large panel to your left, it's not only easier to actually use, but it's also easy to see what's on it. Sometimes with the Lee, if you're so close up, you might miss something on it. So this allows it to have a nice clear view of it.
Now, right next to the driver, on his right hand side, this is where you'd have the co-driver.
So the main job of the co-driver and bow gunner was to man the 30 cal machine gun to protect the tank from infantry descending onto it, and the second most important job was to take over from the driver should the driver be killed or taken out, and it was a case of just dragging the body out and hopping across into the driver's seat.
So now you've seen inside the vehicles. Alex is now going to go through a bit more information on them just to compare the two tanks.
And now we'll go into a little bit more detail comparing the two vehicles, starting with the Sherman. Introduced in 1942, it was the backbone of the US Army's armoured forces throughout the Second World War. The M4 originally came equipped with a 75mm gun. Now it was a cannon that was effective against most German armour early in the war, although it still faced challenges against the thick armour of the Tiger I and the Panther, which is why they were later upgraded to the 76mm gun, which was much better for anti-tank capabilities. When it comes to protection, the Sherman's armour ranged from about 1 to 4 inches thick. While not as heavily armoured as some of its German counterparts, its sloped armour design helped deflect incoming shots, providing much better protection than many people think. However, versatility was the Sherman's true strength. It could be adapted for loads of roles beyond just being the main battle tank. In the heat of battle, it serves as an infantry support vehicle, a command tank, and even in specialised forms like the flamethrower equipped Zippo tanks or the amphibious D-Day tanks, used during the Normandy invasion. Another key advantage was its mobility. With a top speed of about 30 miles per hour, it was quick and agile on the battlefield, capable of keeping up with the fast-paced movements of Allied forces in Europe and North Africa. And perhaps one of the most important traits of the Sherman was its reliability. Even when damaged, the Sherman could often be repaired on the battlefield by the crew, allowing it to stay in action much longer than many of its competitors.
The M4 Sherman was pretty much the tank that defined America's tank doctrine during the war. It wasn't the most powerful or heavily armoured tank, but it was built to get the job done and to keep fighting no matter the odds. Before the M4 Sherman became the icon of American tank warfare, there was the M3 Lee. Now, it was introduced in 1941. The Lee was America's first widely used medium tank during the Second World War. While it doesn't have the same legacy as the Sherman, it has to be said it played a vital role in the early wars of the war, especially in North Africa.
It's fair to say the Lee has a very unique design compared to many other tanks. Its most interesting feature has definitely got to be the dual gun setup. It's a large 75mm gun which they mounted on the hull, and a much smaller 37mm gun mounted in a very cramped turret. This design was intended to give the tank a heavy punch in the hull mounted gun while still remaining some anti-tank capabilities with the smaller gun on top. While the Lee's 75mm gun was effective early in the war, it was mostly used against infantry and light armour. It also just didn't have the flexibility of the turret-mounted cannon, which came later in the Sherman. The 37mm gun on top of the turret wasn't great against heavily armoured German tanks, and this was one of the main reasons why the tank was phased out.
But why put the 75mm cannon on the side? Why not put it on top? Well, the US Army needed a tank quickly, especially as they were entering World War II, so they adapted the design of earlier tanks. Now, the 75mm gun was large and powerful for the time, and placing it in the hull allowed for a more immediate and practical solution to increase firepower. A fully rotating turret at the time would have taken a lot more time to design and produce, time that they didn't have.
Also, mounting the 75mm gun on the hull as opposed to in the turret helped free up a lot of space for the crew and the ammunition. It ended up being a balance between firepower and internal space. In terms of protection, the M3 Lee was similar to the Sherman, but definitely had some weaknesses. Its armour ranged from about half an inch to 2.5 inches thick, which provided decent protection early in the war, but as the war progressed, its design became increasingly vulnerable to German tank guns, especially the powerful 75mm and the 88mm cannons. Also, because the whole vehicle was riveted together, it meant that if one shell hit the side of it, quite often the welds on the inside of the rivets would explode, killing the crew inside. However, despite these shortcomings, the M3 Lee was crucial during the early stages of the war, especially in North Africa.
The British, who at the time had limited resources, were very impressed by the Lee's firepower, and they used it very effectively against the German and Italian forces. The tank was also used in the Pacific theatre, although it saw less success there, mainly due to the challenging terrain of the Pacific Islands.
One of the key drawbacks of the M3 Lee was its mobility. With a top speed of only about 24 miles per hour, it was slower and less manoeuvrable than the Sherman. This limited its effectiveness in fast-moving battles, especially as tank warfare evolved and became much more dynamic.
While the M3 Lee was a solid tank in the early wars, it was eventually replaced by the more advanced M4 Sherman as the war progressed. However, it still provided valuable experience in tank design, paving the way for future tank development. Now that we've looked at the basics of each tank, let's look at the differences in their design, focusing on the three main factors: mobility, armour and firepower.
First, let's talk about mobility. The M4 Sherman was built for speed and manoeuvrability. With a top speed of about 30 miles per hour, it was faster and more agile than many of its competitors. This was crucial in fast-moving tank battles, particularly in Europe, where the terrain and battle conditions demanded quick movements. In contrast, the M3 Lee was slow, with only a top speed of about 24 miles per hour. While this may not sound like much of a difference in warfare, the extra speed gave the Sherman a distinctive edge. The M3 Lee's slower pace hindered its ability to keep up with the faster moving units or react to changes in the battlefield as quickly as the Sherman could. Looking at the armour, both tanks had relatively similar armour thickness, with the Sherman definitely having a little bit more, ranging in the Lee from about half an inch to 2.5 inches as said earlier, and about 1 to 4 inches on the Sherman. The difference wasn't necessarily the thickness, but how the armour was used. The Sherman's sloped armour provided much better protection overall. The sloping design helped deflect incoming shells, making it effective at deflecting shots versus the more vertical armour of the M3 Lee.
While the M3 Lee's armour wasn't ineffective, it was more vulnerable, particularly against the powerful German 75mm and 80mm guns. The Sherman, with its more advanced armour design, had much better chance of surviving through these hits, but keep in mind, neither of these tanks was impervious to the heavier German weaponry, and both would definitely take damage in direct hits.
When it comes to firepower, the M4 Sherman had the advantage in versatility. Early on, it was equipped with the 75mm gun, a very reliable weapon that was capable of holding its own against most enemy tanks and infantry. In the later stages of the war, the Sherman was upgraded to the 76mm gun, which improved its ability to engage heavily armoured tanks like the Panther and the Tiger.
Meanwhile, the M3 Lee had a distinctive dual gun setup. The 75mm gun mounted on top of it was definitely effective against infantry and lighter armoured vehicles, but it lacked the flexibility of fully rotating turrets. The 37mm turret mounted gun had some anti-tank capabilities, but was nowhere near as powerful as the 75mm gun on the Sherman, especially against the more heavily armoured Axis tanks.
The Lee's turret design was one of its biggest drawbacks. The turret only partially rotated, which limited its firepower in comparison to the Sherman's fully rotating turret. This meant the Lee had to position carefully in battle, as it couldn't quickly engage targets in all directions like the Sherman could.
Now that we've looked at the design of both tanks, let's look at their battlefield performance and their roles. While both the M4 Sherman and the Lee were important to the Allied war effort, they each found their place at different stages of the war.
By the time the Sherman hit the battlefield in 1942, it was ready for action. Its versatility allowed it to take on loads of roles, making it an extremely adaptable weapon of war. The Sherman wasn't just a frontline tank. As I said earlier, it was used as a command vehicle, a recovery vehicle, and like I say, even a specialised flamethrower tank for the Normandy invasion. The Sherman's design allowed for quick field repairs. Crews could often get their tanks back into action after taking hits, keeping them operational even after taking a beating. This reliability was one of the key factors that made Sherman such a successful tank, as it could keep fighting much longer than many of its competitors. On the battlefield, the Sherman proved itself in major engagements such as the Battle of the Bulge and the push into Germany. Its mobility, its ease of repair and adaptability to different combat scenarios made it a great tank for the fast-paced, fluid warfare that defined much of the Allied offensive in Western Europe. The M3 Lee, on the other hand, was thrown into action much earlier, playing a crucial role in the North African campaign. While its design may have been considered outdated by the time the M4 Sherman arrived, the M3 Lee still definitely had a significant impact. Its firepower was useful in engaging Italian and German tanks, especially during the early part of the war when the Allies were still learning how to counter German tank designs. The Lee's large production numbers meant it was a common sight in the desert campaign, and despite its shortcomings, it was often used in mass. Overwhelming Axis forces was sheer numbers. The British, who were in need of reliable tanks at the time, made use of the Lee, and it performed quite well in the desert, especially when combined with British tactics and training.
However, obviously the M3 Lee's slower speed and the less flexible turret design meant it wasn't as effective in more mobile battles. The Lee's slower pace made it less capable of responding to rapid changes in the battle.
As the war progressed and the Allies began to face harder opposition, especially in Europe, the M4 Sherman replaced the Lee in frontline combat. Its faster speed, its better armour and its more versatile gun made it the tank of choice for Allied forces in later years of the war. As World War II ended, the legacy of both the Sherman and the Lee did live on. Although designed in World War II, both tanks played a key role in shaping future tank development and military strategy for decades to come. As I said at the very beginning of this video, the M4 Sherman is often referred to as the workhorse of the Allied forces, and it has earned this pedestal in tank history. Its mass production and adaptability made it a cornerstone of Allied tank strategy throughout the war. It was so good that the Sherman was exported to several countries and continued to see action in conflicts long after the end of World War II.
Even today, I would say it's definitely the most popular symbol of American tank warfare. While the Sherman was eventually phased out as newer and more advanced tanks were made and developed, it was still saw action in other wars such as the Korean War and other post-World War II conflicts. The tank design, combined with the sheer number of units built, meant it remained a key player around the world's militaries for many years after the war.
But the M3 Lee, although it was eventually overshadowed by the Sherman, it definitely left an important legacy. While its design definitely had its flaws, the M3 Lee was crucial in the early years of the war. Its introduction marked a significant shift in American tank development and provided valuable lessons in tank warfare that would inform the design of future tanks, including its replacer, the Sherman.
The M3 Lee was an early example of how tank design could evolve to meet the demands of an ever-changing battlefield. While it was nowhere near as successful in the long run as the Sherman, it definitely serves as a great stopgap which gave the Allies a crucial advantage in North Africa and helped shift the momentum of the war in the Allies' favour.
It has to be said, both tanks played a huge part in shaping tank warfare. The Sherman's influence on tank design, particularly its emphasis on mass production, versatility and ease of repair, became the standard for future tank development. Meanwhile, the Lee's dual gun design and its role in early tank battles laid the groundwork for better designed tanks that would come later on. Obviously, the Sherman's legacy is undeniable. It was a key factor in the Allied victory, and its design principles influenced tank developments for years to come. The M3 Lee, although less remembered today by the general non-history loving public, it played a crucial role in the beginning of the war, proving the importance of armoured warfare and helping the Allies transition into the more refined tank designs that would follow.
The Sherman and the Lee may have had different paths, but they both left a huge mark on history. Together, they helped shape the outcome of World War II and the future of armoured combat. And who knows, without them, we may not even have had this museum here. Thank you very much for watching, hope you did enjoy it. If you do want to come and actually have a look around our museum, by all means go to the link down below. It's www.armourgeddon.co.uk. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys in the next video.